All right, class, this is Mr. Neugebauer. I'm going to be showing you guys kind of what to do on this first section of Unit 2. So you should go to page 111, and it should say Solve Equations with Rational Coefficients, Lesson 1 at the top. That's page 111. So if you need to pause and get there, feel free to do so. All right, here we go. It says two numbers with a product of 1, I'm going to underline 1, such as 3/4 and 4/3. Now, product means multiply. So if two numbers multiply to get 1, they are called reciprocals, or our vocab word here, multiplicative inverse. Okay? So basically all we're saying is if two numbers, specifically usually fractions, multiply and get 1, which these do, 3/4 times 4 over 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 over 12 equals 1. Those are what we call reciprocals or multiplicative inverses. Okay? So let's define exactly what that means here in our notes. Basically, it's just 2, so I write the number 2. If you want fractions that multiply to 1. I'll say that. Two fractions that multiply to 1 or equal 1. All right? That's what we're looking at here. So if we describe it, basically what happened here? How did we get from this first one to this second one? Basically, we just flipped the top and bottom. So all we would say is the numerator, meaning the top number, and denominator switch. So the 3 on top became bottom, the 4 on bottom became top. They just switched. There we go. So let's list an example. Example might be 2/3 would become 3 over 2. All right? What would a non-example be? A non-example would be like 2/3 equaling negative 2/3, because no actual flipping of top and bottom occurred there. Or, for example, if we had 3.5, if we made that an improper fraction, 3 times 2 plus 1 is 7, to 7 over 2, something like that would not be a reciprocal or multiplicative inverse. So it says describe how multiplicative inverse is used in division of fractions. So we're going to be doing some dividing of fractions here today, but we don't want to divide a fraction because it's a messy thing. So me and Miss Neely, we have this thing called LCF, which means leave, change, flip. So if instead of dividing, like if we had 5 divided by 1/3, we wouldn't want to divide by the fraction. Instead, we would leave the same. Let's make that 5 over 2. So 5 over 2 divided by 1/3, we would leave, meaning 5 over 2, we leave. We change dividing to multiplying, and then we flip the second fraction. Instead of 1/3, we have 3 over 1. We multiply. 5 times 3 is 15 over 2. And then you would simplify from there. How many times does 2 to go in? That'll give us like 7.5. Okay? So if you need to pause, go over that again. Feel free to do so. But if you're feeling good, let's move on. Basically here it has a crazy motorcycle guy flipped upside down. He's like, yikes, things are going crazy. It says, how can the action of a motorcycle in the photo help you remember what the multiplicative inverse is? Well, basically just that things get flipped upside down. That's what a reciprocal is, multiplicative inverse. It's just when you flip the fraction one way to the other. Alrighty? Go ahead and turn the page. Here we go. Let's take a look at example 1 here. And we're going to go down here. It says, the numerical factor of a term that contains a variable is called the coefficient of the variable. Basically, if you just look at this, the coefficient is just the number right in front of a variable. Okay, that's what a coefficient is. I'm only mentioning it simply because it's one of your vocab words. I know a lot of you guys are pretty familiar with that. You just need to know what a coefficient is, the number in front of a variable. So let's go here, look at example 1, and let's actually solve some equations here. It says 3/4 times c equals 18. So if I take 3/4 times c equals 18, I want to find out what c is. Solving equations are great. As long as you follow the process, you'll get the correct answer every time. So right now, we want to find out what just c is. Our problem is we have this other stuff with c, specifically the times 3/4. Well, how do we get rid of multiplying by 3/4? Well, we divide by 3/4. But on the previous page, we already learned we do not want to divide fractions. Instead, we multiply by the reciprocal. So notice, instead of dividing here, I have multiply
Madison Page,
by...
if you're in the building, please come to the office. Madison Page.
Notice right here, I have multiply by 4/3. I multiply by the reciprocal instead of dividing. And what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So then basically, if you multiply this out, these cancel out and become just 1. So you're left with 1c, or just c. Then if you multiply this side out, you get 24. C equals 24. Then you plug it in to solve. Let's go ahead and do example A together. 1/5 x equals 12. I'm going to go over here. Now these are the steps me and Miss Neal are going to show you how to do. Step 1, I'm going to write here, step 1 is always write the problem. So 1/5 times x equals 12. Okay? Step 2, and you're going to hear me and Miss Neely keep saying these steps. Step 2 is put a line down below the equal sign. This gives us two sides. You hear us say what you do to one side, you do to the other. We're clearly, distinctly making two sides here, so you make a line. Step 3 is to undo. Well, what do we need to undo? What's happening to the variable? The coefficient in front is 1/5. So how do we get rid of multiplying by 1/5? We divide by 1/5, but we don't want to divide fractions. We multiply by the reciprocal. So to undo dividing by 1/5, I will multiply by the reciprocal, 5/1. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So those cancel over here and just become 1. So I'm left with x or 1x. Either way would be fine. And then it's 12 times 5/1. Well, I need to make 12 a fraction. So 12/1, multiply your top numbers. 12 times 5 is 60. 1 times 1 is 1. 60 is the same as 60/1. So x equals 60. If you need to watch that again, feel free to do so. Now we have to do the check. If it says check, we're supposed to check. Basically, we just plug in 60, see if it works. So we have 1/5 times 60 equals 12. We'll grab our calculator, see if that actually works. 1/5 times 60, indeed it equals 12. So show me on your paper that equals 12. 12 equals 12. That should be circled or boxed, and that should be circled or boxed. Okay? Now, go ahead and try C on your own. Pause the video, work on it on your own, and then come back to me. Okay, you now should have worked that out. Let's take a look at C. I'm going to bring out my separate piece of paper here. We have 15 equals 5/3 times n. So there it is right there. Well, first step was write the original. Step 2, put the line down underneath the equal sign. I have this multiplying within. Well, how do I get rid of multiplying a fraction? I multiply by the reciprocal, so 3/5 to both sides. And this is where lined paper is really great. Then these cancel, become 1, so I have 1n, or just n, equals, well now 15, I need a bottom number, so 15 times 3 is 45. 1 times 5 is 5. So I have 45 divided by 5, which then final step, simplify, 9 equals n. Okay? If you need to watch that again, feel free. But if not, let's move on to example 2. Here's example 2. Same idea here, except we have some mixed numbers instead of regular fractions. So with this mixed number here, I have 1/2 s equals 16.5. So step 1, write the original. 1/2 times s equals 16.5. Step 2, put the line. Step 3, I undo. I'm multiplying right here, these two. But before I can undo, I actually need to change this to an improper fraction. So I have 1 times 2, which is 2, plus 1 is 3. So that's actually giving me 3/2 times s. And this one, 16 times 2, I want to make this one improper as well. 16 times 2 is 32, plus 1 is 33, so I have 33/2.
Okay, hold on. gotta get my craft, and I should have done that beforehand, my bad. I'll edit that out.
Going fast,
Good.
right?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's been maybe 10.
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay.
All right, keep it up, boss.
So here we go, steps. So now that I've made those improper, I know that those will undo each other, okay? Once I multiply by each side by 3 over 2. So I'm left with S equals, and so I multiply 33 by, oh, I forgot to flip it. Every now and then teachers make mistakes. I did 3 over 2. I should have done 2 over 3. Because I had to flip that. I made it 3 over 2, which is improper, but then I had to flip it once I multiplied. So that should be 2 over 3. So 33 times 2 is 66 over, then it was 3 or 2 over 3, so 3 times 2 is 6. So how many times will 6 go into 66? 11 times. S equals 11. Okay, and then you can check it. Go ahead right now and do E on your own, and be careful with the negative. So remember, it's a negative times 8. So pause it, do that one on your own, and then come back to me.
Okay, now that you guys are back, let's look at E in our book and do this example together. We have negative 9 5/8 W equals 108. I went ahead and wrote that on a separate sheet of paper just to have more room. So the first step is to always draw your straight line down. So there's my straight line down from the equal sign. And now I want to turn this into an improper fraction. Hopefully you remember how to turn this number into an improper fraction. You may have learned it as the butterfly method. I know that Mr. Neugebauer has already talked about this. But I'm going to take this 9 times the 8, and then I'm going to add to the 5. So when I take 9 times 8, 9 times 8 plus 5 is what I'm doing to get my top number. So 9 times 8 is 72. 72 plus 5 is a 77. So my top number is now a 77. But don't forget this negative sign right here. So it's a negative 77 over 8 is what this becomes as an improper fraction. So I have a negative 77 over 8W equals a 108. And now I can go ahead and solve. If you ask yourself, what do I do between negative 77 over 8 and W? Well, hopefully, since you know that they're side by side each other, that I'm going to multiply this fraction times W. So I want to do the opposite. So I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 77 over 8. And hopefully you remember the LCF. I'm going to leave this one. I'm going to flip the sign. So where it was, this is what I'm doing right here, negative 77 over 8. In order to do that, instead of dividing by this fraction, I'm going to multiply by its reciprocal. I'm going to multiply by its inverse. I'm going to flip this fraction. So what I'm really going to do to get rid of this is I'm going to take W equals, I'm going to take 108 times a negative 8 over 77, because I'm going to flip that fraction. Now, if I look at this, if I turn 108 into a fraction, I have 108 over 1 times a negative 8 over 77. And then I just multiply across. A 108 times a negative 8, if you do that on your calculator, if you take 108 times 8, you get an 864. So I get a negative 864 up here. On the bottom, I have a 1 times 77, which is just a 77. So here is my answer. I don't care if you leave it in an improper fraction, but let's go ahead and turn it into a mixed number. Since my original wasn't a mixed number, let's go ahead and turn it back into a mixed number. So this is what I have. I have W equals a negative 864 over 77, and I want to turn that back into a mixed number. So on your calculator, there's a couple ways that you can do this. First of all, you can just hit the fraction button, and I have a negative 864 fraction button, which is right here. And then I have 77. And then if you hit equal, well, let me change the mode on this. I apologize for that. what you should be doing is asking yourself, how many times does 77 go into 864? Well, if I take 864 divided by 77, I get this. So I know my answer is a negative because I have a negative on the top and a positive on the bottom. So my answer is a negative 11 point, I look at my calculator, it's an 11.22. Okay? If I turn that into a fraction, I have a negative 11 and 22 over 100, which I then can reduce. 2 goes into both of them, so I end up with an 11 over 50. So my answer is a negative 11 and 11/50. Okay? So that's what you should have gotten on that question. All right, let's keep going.
Now, on to number 3. This one's a little bit easier because there's actually no fraction. We're just dividing with decimals here. Notice there's no fraction, so instead of, you've heard the whole time us say, hey, we don't want to divide by a fraction, instead we multiply by the reciprocal. Well, here we have decimals instead of fractions, so we're just going to divide. So let's take a look at G. So step 1 is write the original. So we have 4.9 equals 0.7 times t. Then how do we get rid of multiplying t by 0.7? We divide by 0.7. Oh, make the line. What you do to one side, you do to the other. Those cancel out, leaves you with just 1. So we have t, 1t, t or 1t either way, equals, we do 4.7. 4.9, not 4.7, 4.9 divided by 0.7 equals 7. So t there equals 7. Okay. Now try h on your own. Pause the video, try it on your own, and then come back to me. Okay, now that you've paused it, let's work it out together. Here we have h, which is 1.4 negative, m equals 2.1. So how do I get rid of multiplying m by negative 1.4? I divide negative 1.4 from both sides. Those cancel, leaves me m or 1m equals, well, I'm going to do 2.1 divided by negative 1.4 gets me negative 1.5. So that's what you should have got. Okay, I hope that helps out. Now real fast, let's look at the final example. Here it says, Latoya softball team won 75%, or 18 of its games. Define a variable. Then write and solve an equation to determine the number of games the team played. It says Latoya softball team won 18 games, which was 75% of the games played. Let n represent the number of games played. Write and solve an equation. So 0.75 represents 75%, times n being the total number of games will equal 18. So, same thing before, you divide by the decimal. We find out n equals 24, meaning the total number of games was 24. All right? If you need to rewatch anything, feel free to do so. But if you got everything, that's great. We'll see you in class tomorrow.